The NRCS CPA 52 Environmental Evaluation Worksheet is used to document the outcomes of Phases 1 and 2 of the conservation planning process. In the course, two scenarios were presented to help familiarize you with the overall process and documentation requirements for the NRCS CPA 52. Let's review the NRCS CPA 52 for the last scenario, documenting Mr. Farmer's pasture land. In sections A through C, Mr. Farmer's name, the applicable conservation plan ID number, and identification of the location where the proposed activities will occur were documented. In section D, the client's objectives were identified and listed. In this case, Mr. Farmer wants to reduce the amount of forage brought onto the farm, improve forage quality produced on the farm, and increase profitability. Over in section E, the need for action was documented. The need for action being a reduction in soil compaction, improved grazing efficiency of livestock on pasture lands, while controlling streambank erosion. Moving down the form to section F, resource concerns and existing benchmark conditions, after walking the land with Mr. Farmer and making field notes, planning criteria obtained from the field office technical guide was consulted to identify resource concerns. Depending on the concern and related cause, planning criteria screening levels and assessment tools were used to identify resource concerns. Later on, when evaluating alternatives, the planning criteria was consulted again to see if the proposed alternatives would meet or not meet planning criteria. The benchmark condition for each resource concern was documented in section F. Documentation reflected the assessment tools used in the planning criteria and benchmark data. Where no resource concern was identified, it would have been noted on the form for the specific resource. In section G, Special Environmental Concerns, benchmark conditions were documented for each special environmental concern. Guide sheets and fact sheets contained within the form were consulted to help document the benchmark condition. Information contained in the field office technical guide was also used. Thorough documentation is important so that any reviewers will know everything that was considered. When a concern did not apply to the planning area, it was noted as such in the benchmark condition. Back up toward the top of the form in section H, Alternatives, the alternatives, including the no action alternative, were recorded. The formulated alternatives attempted to address most, if not all, resource concerns and human considerations. If you recall, Mr. Farmer had a limited amount of time, and this factor was considered when formulating alternatives. The check mark next to Alternative 2 indicates that this alternative meets the state criteria for a resource management system. In the following sections, I and J, evaluation of the alternatives were used to assess the projected impacts of the alternatives on benchmark conditions. In section I, Effects of Alternatives, planning criteria was consulted to see if the alternatives meet or do not meet the planning criteria threshold for a resource concern. A check was placed in the Not PC box to indicate that the resource concern does not meet planning criteria. In section J, Impacts to Special Environmental Concerns, guide sheets and fact sheets provided within the CPA 52 form were followed to help determine the impact of each alternative on the benchmark condition. Once again, thorough documentation indicates that the impact on each special environmental concern was considered and that NRCS complied with the requirements of laws, regulations, and executive orders, as well as its own policy. For each special environmental concern, be sure to indicate if the alternative may affect or has no effect on the benchmark condition, and type in the reasons for the choice you made. In section K, Other Agencies and Broad Public Concerns, alternatives were further evaluated for any necessary easements, permissions, or permits. Additionally, cumulative effects were considered for the impacts on the environment resulting from the incremental impacts of past, present, and foreseeable future action. In section L, Mitigation, mitigation measures to offset any adverse impacts and not already incorporated in the alternatives were documented. In section M, Preferred Alternative, the client selects an alternative. In our case, Mr. Farmer decided which actions will be taken on his land. Mr. Farmer selected alternative 1, and the rationale for his decision was documented. Moving down to Section N, Context. In Section N, Context, the context that were used to evaluate the alternatives was recorded. Significance of the action was analyzed in the context of farm, county, and hydrologic unit. In Section O, Determination of Significance or Extraordinary Circumstances, this is where the preferred alternative selected by Mr. Farmer underwent additional evaluation. Each action was evaluated using the special environmental concerns along with significance factors to determine whether an action would have extraordinary circumstances and potential for significant impacts on the human environment. If any of the questions in Section O are answered yes, then contact the State Environmental Liaison, as there may be extraordinary circumstances and significance issues to consider, and a site-specific NEPA analysis may be required. In our example, the absence of any extraordinary circumstances means that the actions can proceed. Note that before documenting the categorical exclusion, it is important to read Section 610.46 of the NECH. This section provides a list of all categorical exclusions that apply to actions, as well as more detailed considerations and requirements for their use. Determination in Section O was documented with a yes or no response for each of the questions. In Section P, the individual completing Parts A through O of the NRCS CPA 52 must sign and date to indicate they have used the best available information. This may or may not be the same person as the agency representative. In cases where the planner is not an NRCS employee, they must sign in the first signature area, and then the NRCS employee will sign in the second signature area to confirm and validate the information as the responsible agency. When NRCS plans on behalf of another agency, NRCS need only sign as the planner, and then the lead agency, RFO, will complete the rest of the NRCS CPA 52. The remaining sections of the NRCS CPA 52 were completed by the responsible federal official, or RFO. The RFO documented Section Q, NEPA compliance finding, and Section R, rationale supporting the finding, concluding with their signature in Section S. Remember, thorough and complete documentation in the NRCS CPA 52 reflects the NRCS conservation planning process and applicable steps. Be sure to document your work so that others, like the RFO, can move forward with their evaluation and findings. Thank you for your time in this course.